All right, let's create a health bar. So I'm going to create a couple variables, HP and HP max, and we'll just keep them at 3 for now. And if we go to add event, this time we're going to add a draw event. So the first thing you want to add is a draw sprite transformed. And the first thing we're going to add here under the sprite is we're going to add a sprite index. And then for the frame, we're going to type in image index. And if we set our X and Y to 0 and click relative, it's just going to means that they're not changing at all, which is what we want. And then we're going to add an if variable. And that's going to be if our HP variable that we just created is greater than 0, because I don't really care if it's going to show health if it is not. And then we're going to draw a health bar. So if we type in draw, we have different ways we can draw health that are built in. And the one that we're going to look at is a health bar. For a value, it's going to be simply HP divided by HP max times 100. And then we're going to have it follow our player. So for now, we'll have our left just be 0. We'll have the top be negative 25. The right be 40. And the bottom is going to be negative 20. Those are coordinates for our health bar. And you can feel free to choose whatever color scheme you want. I'll just do a typical red and yellow. Let's go ahead and test that out. And now I have this health bar. But you know some things are going on with my sprite now. And that's because when we added our draw function, this will supersede anything that we do within our step function. So we need to now do all of our sprite modification within this draw event. So I'll change this to player 1. And then I'm going to add my other variables into here as well. So I have my if variable. We'll say if movex is equal to 0, then we want it to set our sprite to the stationary or idle sprite. Then we simply say else we'll set sprite. And then we want to worry about which way it's going to be facing too, because it's not swapping that yet. So for that, I'm going to simply switch over to our scale X and create a variable called facing. And this I'll actually add within our player step function. Instead of having it, I'll create a variable. For now, I'll set it for 1. Then within my step event, instead of having it swap sprites, I'm going to have it just modify that variable. And that's going to actually take care of it within our draw event. So now instead of having it swap out the sprites here, it's just going to adjust this variable to either positive or negative. Great. So let's have our wolf collision do damage. So we'll say if the player collides with the wolf, then it'll lower the HP by -5. But I don't want to do this constantly because it'll drain the health pretty quick. So I want a little bit of period of invulnerability. So I'll create a variable called damage, and I'll first initially start off with 0. And then once it gets hit, it'll change this to value of 1. So it'll only get hit or allow the player to lose health if damage is 0. So once it gets hit, it'll change damage by 1 every frame until it equals 100, and then it resets damage. And then we'll also set up in our draw function some kind of visuals to correlate with this. So we'll create another variable. This time we'll call it blink. So we'll say if damage is greater than or equal to 1, so as it's counting up to 100, we'll set this variable blink back and forth from 0 to 1. So it checks that if it's 1, then it'll set it to 0. And if it's 0, it'll set it to 1. And this will cause it to go back and forth. And we'll set this into our alpha of our draw sprite transform. Let's take a look at what this looks like. And we blink, and then we go back on. And while we're blinking, we can't get hit anymore. And it's like a little bit of a period where we're invulnerable to the attacks.